Welcome back to our next episode. So, this is going to be our third episode. Last time we talked about kind of like toxic Plutonian relationships, but today we're going to talk about healthy relationships. So, Mary, go ahead.
Hi, guys. So, we're going to talk about what to look for in synastry or relationship astrology when it comes to healthy relationships. So, the first thing that you want to look for is harmonious moon aspects with the other person. So, like moon conjunct moon, moon sextile, or trine the other person's moon. That usually indicates a high level of emotional compatibility, and basically, you both express your emotions and feel your emotions in a way that's complementary to each other. So that's kind of key to analyze when it comes to synastry because obviously, your emotional compatibility is kind of key in order for the relationship to last and really thrive. So that's kind of the first one that I look for. Another one is Venus. Venus compatibility between the signs as well, or between both people. So Venus conjunct Venus as well, Venus sextile or trine the other person's Venus. Even Venus and Mars, good aspects between people, usually indicates that you have the same love language or that you express love in a way that makes the other person receive it or even feel loved by you. So those two are kind of the biggest things that I look for. And then the other one would be planets in each other's love houses. So the love houses are the areas of life that I like to look for are the fifth house, sometimes the fourth house, even the seventh house, even the 11th house, although it's more friendship based. It usually indicates, obviously you do need a friendship as well in the relationship, but obviously it indicates that, you guys just see each other as best friends and can confide in each other. So those are the big ones. But also, like, for example, if you have Venus in Scorpio, you're going to like somebody who has placements in your eighth house, um, just because that house is ruled by Scorpio. So I like to look for things like that. But ultimately, those two planets, Venus, the moon, and I would also say Mars. So those three planets are key to analyze, and you want them to be making harmonious aspects to each other.
Yeah, and something that it kind of hit me, and it's kind of, I don't know, common sense now that I understand it, especially when using the whole sign system. Like, what house is ruled by what sign based off someone's rising sign. So for me, Aries rules my fifth house, Gemini rules my seventh house, Libra rules my 11th house. So if I know that person has Aries, Gemini, or Libra placements, or Pisces rules my fourth house, I'm going to be able to, without even looking at our synastry, know that they have planets in those houses that we're talking about.
Yeah, well, that makes sense because those are like the key personal houses, especially like with the seventh house. You really feel like they're your other half. With the fourth house, you feel like you've known each other before because the fourth house is family. So they feel like family to you. Even like for you being a Sagittarius rising, the ninth house is key as well. I know you mentioned you're super attracted to like Leo placements.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense because Leo is on your ninth house.
Yeah, I think that's something I wanted to bring up, that I'm not necessarily super attracted to Gemini placements or Aries placements on a regular basis, but I do find myself very attracted to um, Leos and Aquariuses, which rules my ninth and third house. But like we kind of discussed this earlier, Gemini, which is on my seventh house, naturally rules the third house, and my
Yeah,
ascendant is in Sagittarius, where I have Juno and Eros, and that rules the ninth house, where Leo is on my chart. So it kind of makes sense that ninth and third house synastry would be important to me.
yeah, and again with the seventh house, it represents what you need in a partnership. So it also represents people who are attracted to you or that you tend to attract, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're attracted to that sign. It's more about being attracted to the qualities of that sign. So in lots of healthy relationships, the synastry that I usually see is you would think they would have planets in each other's seventh house. but
Right.
that's not always the case. So
Right.
if you have Gemini in the seventh house, like you do, then it would make sense that the third house would be key to analyze in synastry for you because you need somebody that you could communicate with well,
Right. And it
as
makes
well.
sense because I communicate in an Aquarius way because I have Aquarius on my third house. So, communication, having Gemini on the seventh house means that I like to be intellectually stimulated, but I want to be stimulated in an Aquarius way because I have Aquarius on my third house, which is the house of communication. So, it makes sense that I would want to be communicated with someone who has Aquarius placements.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And also looking at Mercury and if it's making aspects to the other person's Mercury or even conjunctions. Like, for example, with myself and my husband, we're both ruled by Mercury because we're both Virgo risings. And we have Mercury conjunct the other's vertex, which is
Okay.
double whammy. So his Mercury on my vertex, my Mercury on his vertex. And the vertex is also key to analyze when it comes to synastry because the vertex is like that bonding aspect with the person. It's a calculation, so it's not really an actual planet.
Right.
But when it's activated by somebody else's personal planet, that person has a very deep impact on you. And when they're aspecting the ruler of your ascendant, whatever that planet is, that also means they have a very deep impact on you. So sometimes with that, you definitely want to have them aspecting the rule of your ascendant. So that's kind of a big deal. And, for me, I'm ruled by Mercury, which isn't really a romantic planet. And I also have my vertex and my sun and my Mercury in the sixth house, which isn't really a romantic house. However, for me, it is when somebody's planet aspects that because it usually implies that we have a great mental connection and I need that. So it works the same way, I think, for you, Chase, with your
Yes.
house being in Gemini.
Yeah, like you have Aquarius on your sixth house. Do you have an Aquarius sun and do you have Mercury as well in Aquarius?
Yeah, I have Mercury in Aquarius too.
So both of those are in your sixth house. So when you have those aspected, that's going to be a good romantic connection for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I have my vertex there conjuncting my sun. And I also married another Aquarius. And
Right.
Mercury is the chart ruler. It's the ruler of my chart and also the ruler of my midheaven. And I have Venus in Capricorn.
Right.
So you have to really think deeply about it where it all connects because Capricorn rules the 10th house. So having my midheaven in the 10th house in Gemini, basically also, I've been with many Gemini placements as well because I have Venus in Capricorn. So that's what I like.
Right.
So you have to really kind of use your critical thinking skills and connect the dots. It's not just based on the sign that you see in a house or the sign of like your Venus or whatever. You have to actually, follow the thread, so to speak.
Right. Like it's very individualized for each person. But like you were saying about Vertex, I have Vertex in Leo in my ninth house. So that's like just another double whammy.
Yeah, exactly. So the vertex is a very irresistible point. When it's being aspected by somebody's personal planets, it's almost magnetic. It's like the nodes of the moon, even, where you just are very drawn to that person. And there's a feeling of fatedness to the relationship. And usually it causes you to transform in some deep, impactful way. So, wherever the vertex is in your chart, by sign and by house, can tell you more. But it usually is like a fated type of relationship when you
Right.
have somebody who aspects your vertex, especially by conjunction. I would say that one is the strongest.
Right. So find out where your vertex is and what sign it is and what house it's in, and be on the lookout for those signs because those are the probably the people that are going to bring fated events in your life.
Yeah, so you want to use your critical thinking skills in synastry. So let's say you have, Venus and Scorpio. You're going to want somebody who aspects your Pluto because that's the ruler of your Venus sign. So, whereas somebody else might, really not like that, or it might
Right.
be tough to handle because Pluto's not really an easy planet, as we talked about in our last podcast. For somebody who has Venus and Scorpio, they're probably going to love that because
Right.
that's the ruler of that sign. And the same goes with asteroids. So, like if you have, let's say, Eros in Sagittarius. Eros represents what you're sexually attracted to, what you find sexually irresistible. You want to look at Jupiter, and hopefully, your partner has some aspects to your Jupiter because that's the ruler of that sign. So it's never a surface level type of analysis in synastry. So when you know how to analyze it, you could truly tell how that person feels about you, how you make them feel, and how the relationship kind of plays out over time.
Something that I learned very quickly about astrology is that everyone's disagreeing on everything, and you just kind of have to go through and find out what you think is true and what works for you. And one of those things that people disagree on a lot is that each house is naturally ruled by a sign. A lot of people disagree with that. But after we put the two and two together, that I'm attracted to Leos and Aquariuses because of my seventh house ruler being Gemini and my Eros and Juno being in Sagittarius, that definitely confirmed to me that that is definitely true, that each house is ruled by those signs.
Yeah, I feel like it's actually traditional astrology and Hellenistic, where they don't believe in that back then. However, it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Each house is definitely ruled by a sign.
Mm-hmm.
The way the what it represents, the area of life is basically very closely linked to the energy of that sign. So, like the third house, for example, represents your community, your elementary school, your siblings, and most of all, the way you communicate and the way you think. So it makes sense that it would be related to Mercury and to Gemini in that sense. Whereas with Virgo, having to do with health and it ruling the sixth house, which is all about your health, it just makes sense. So
Yeah.
basically, I don't know why I don't know why traditional astrologers are so anti associating the houses with the signs. But like you said, everybody has a different opinion in astrology. You can do the research yourself, but
Right.
there's always going to be contradictory information out there. So that's where you really have to use your intuition. Whether you're an astrologer or just a student studying astrology, you have to use your intuition
Yes,
in
for
order to
sure.
determine what is right and what is wrong. And there are different perspectives, and that's okay. I don't put other astrologers down or people who have differing beliefs than I do down because it's simply a different perspective.
For sure. Another thing is that, a lot of times we hear a lot of negative things about eighth and ninth house synastry, but what do you think about when people have like a stellium in those houses?
So when you have a stellium in the eighth house, let's do the eighth house because they're
Okay.
actually very different. The
Yes.
eighth house is a pretty intense house. It rules over some of our deepest, darkest fears. So there's fear there. However, it also represents the most powerful area of life, which is how
Yeah.
you transform and how you regenerate yourself.
In
And
deep
it's ruled by Pluto
relationships.
and by Scorpio. So if you have many Scorpio placements or like a prominent Pluto placement, you're going to like people's planets falling into your eighth house. If you have planets in your eighth house yourself, the same thing applies. You're going to like people who have planets in that house. Now, if you're like me, where I don't really have any Scorpio placements besides like Pluto in Scorpio, and my eighth house is empty, I kind of have a hard time with eighth house synastry. While it gets this reputation of like being super hot and like this amazing passionate sex, because the eighth house also rules that, for me, I feel like it actually just triggers me too much and it doesn't ultimately end up lasting. So I don't really like that house
Hmm.
myself, but I feel like for you, Chase, you might like it because you have a Scorpio
Right.
stellium.
Exactly.
So with the ninth house, it's very different. The people who have planets in your ninth house completely influence your beliefs and your
Right.
view of life. So it is also a very deep house, but it's more of like an airy house. It's ruled by Sagittarius and Jupiter, and
Yeah.
it rules your knowledge. And basically, the ideas that you form about life, your philosophies of life. So while the opposite house, which is the third house, is where you learn and think, the ninth house is what you do with that knowledge. How do you apply it in the world?
Yeah.
What beliefs do you choose to have? It's also related to spirituality, religion, and the God principles. So, what do you perceive God to be? Are you an atheist? Are you into religion, spiritual? Whatever that is all shown in the ninth house. So when people have planets here, and it also rules marriage. So just to throw that in there, because marriage typically, is recognized. under the eyes of God or whatever, traditional marriage I'm talking about. So it's also ninth house stuff. So when people have planets in this house, usually, especially if you have prominent Jupiter or Sagittarius placements, it's a good thing because they influence your beliefs and hopefully in a positive way, depending on whatever planet
Right.
falls into that house. And typically it implies that you have similar overviews of life and similar beliefs. And it can even lead to marriage because that's what this area of life represents as well. Also, Jupiter, which is the ruler of that house in a woman's chart, usually shows the qualities of her spouse, at least the first husband. So I see that a lot as well. But with the ninth house, it's also key to analyze in synastry because it's not as intense as the eighth house. However, it's more of a like, you also, adventure with that person or even like have new experiences with that
Right.
person that you haven't experienced before. So that also helps to kind of bond people together because that's what the ninth house rules as well. It also rules over travel and expansion, like, foreign travel even.
What about the 12th house?
The 12th house is pretty iffy. It can go either way. So, my issue with the 12th house is that it rules over hidden enemies
Mm.
and, they got to go somewhere. So,
Yeah.
we put them in the 12th house.
Oh, but the 7th house rules open enemies.
The 6th house, right?
I thought it was the 7th.
So yeah, the seventh house actually does rule open enemies because I thought you had said the sixth house, but the
Oh,
sixth
okay.
house doesn't rule enemies,
No.
although many astrologers think it does. The
Okay.
seventh house rules over your open enemies. So for that reason, the seventh and the 12th house are super iffy. Like, for example, I don't like people who have planets in my seventh house for whatever reason. I just don't feel attracted to them. Whereas the 12th house, they basically could kind of betray you in some way. There could
Mhm.
be deception, especially if like Venus or Mars fall into this house. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to the rule, like if you have planets in this house, if you have Venus in this house yourself, if you have your North Node there, then it's totally different. But if you
Right.
typically have an empty 12th house, usually it's not really a good thing to have synastry with the 12th house. Sometimes it could lead to like a very deep telepathic bond with the person and like a super deep relationship. However, that's not always the case. So it could go either way. And for that reason, it's too risky for me. When I see this and the person has an empty 12th house and the other person's like Venus or Mars fall into that house, I would consider that a red flag.
Right. What about like love asteroids?
So love asteroids are amazing to use in synastry because they're very specific.
Yeah.
And they usually show, what you need in a partner as far as like the details and like what you're sexually attracted to with Eros, what you need in a spouse with Juno. So, those two are definitely key to analyze. Even the asteroid Amor, number 1221, is about unconditional love or the highest form of love that you can experience as a human. So, although Venus and Neptune kind of represent that, the asteroids are more of a like fixated energy,
Right.
depending on the sign in the house that they're in. And typically, when somebody, aspects an asteroid in somebody else's chart, especially if it's like a powerful asteroid like the ones that I just mentioned, it's just as good as having, aspects to your planets. So asteroids make a big difference as well. They're just as key as planets. We feel them pretty deeply too.
And like you said, in a specific, it's more specific, whereas planets rule so much, it's kind of hard to narrow it down to what it specifically means. Asteroids are so specific, so they're a lot easier to interpret.
Yeah, and the planets also represent like key events that happen in those areas of life. And the sign kind of represents like the energy around those events. The asteroids get way more specific than that. They basically represent more details about what you experience in that area of life. So even like the asteroid Valentine, which is pretty key in its name to analyze. It's about like sacrificial, sweet type of love. So it's not like the deepest form of love, but it's usually a pretty sweet type of love. So when I see somebody's planets aspecting that, I obviously want to see other things being aspected too, because it's not like enough to hold a relationship together. But
Another asteroid.
example is pretty powerful. And there's another one that you just told me about
Yeah.
recently. What was it called?
Jazz.
Yeah, that one. So that one made a lot of sense. But what can you tell us about that? Because
Okay.
I didn't really use it before.
So I really am. My theory is that Jazz is way more intense than Eros because I have Jazz in Leo and I am super into Leos, and I have Eros in Sagittarius and I'm not consistently into Sagittariuses. So, and even Mary just looked at her chart with her husband and she has a lot of aspects with Jazz in her chart, and it's just it's another, it's just like Eros, it's intense sexual attraction.
Yeah, because I was pretty surprised. I mean, I've used many different love asteroids, too many to name here, but I'd never heard of that one because the name doesn't really like imply love,
No.
thing like that. It's kind of like a random name. It's
Right.
JS, Jazz.
JAAS, yeah.
So I looked it up and it's actually conjunct my husband's sun in Aquarius. And I don't really have any like love asteroids or love planets in Aquarius either.
Hmm.
Or, Aquarius is also in my sixth house, which is not really a romantic house.
Right.
So that kind of made a lot of sense because obviously I'm really in love and attracted to my husband, but
Right.
there aren't really many indicators of that in the chart. And then I looked at his, and his was conjunct a little stellium of asteroids in my own fifth house. It was conjunct my Psyche and Neptune. And the funny thing is, too, Chase, that the degree that his was in was the same exact degree of my sun sign in sidereal astrology.
Oh,
So that also makes me think that there's truth to sidereal as well,
yeah.
which do a whole other podcast about that.
Right.
I'm not going to get into it here, but which I've always suspected that sidereal has validity as well,
Yeah.
because sidereal is based on where the planets actually are, like in the sky right now, whereas tropical, is less kind of accurate. However, most people relate more to tropical. So I feel like they're both valid. And also with my ex-husband, he had his Eros exactly conjunct my sun in my sidereal chart.
Wow.
I about his Eros and his tropical chart. So it's pretty cool when it interacts that way.
Um, another two asteroids I want to talk about are Sappho and Psyche.
Yeah, so tell us about them because I feel like you are becoming the asteroid guru in
I'm
a way.
trying to be. So I love Psyche. Psyche is in my third house in Aquarius, and I really feel like your Psyche, you see it a lot in your personality, like almost like a big three. Like, I just feel like it really shows up in everyone's personality. Like for me, I have no personal planets in Aquarius, but I feel very Aquarius. I feel like I've had a very Aquarius experience in life. So I have Psyche and Aura in Aquarius. So
That
Psyche, go on.
I have Aura and Capricorn.
Right. So, and don't you have Psyche too?
Yeah, so we're like, and I'm an Aquarius and she's a Capricorn, so it's
Right.
like,
I think that's a definite like connection because me and Mary, we just met. Like, we were
yeah,
like,
but each other forever connect really well.
yeah, like immediate connection. So I feel like that plays a huge role. Psyche is all about personal transformation. So where you see it in your chart and how it connects with other people, like let's just say you have Psyche conjunct someone's Saturn, you're gonna transform each other in kind of like a responsible, grown up kind of way. Like you're gonna challenge each other to become more grown up, I feel like. You can interpret it that way. But
Yeah, Saturn
so
can.
I think Psyche is like a big deal in Synastry and just in our charts, our natal charts as well. And then Sappho is related to same sex attraction, but for straight people, I feel like it applies the same way. Like it just deals with attraction, but also creativity in the arts. So maybe if you have Sun conjunct Sappho with somebody, you might bring out their creativity and they might be attracted to you as well.
So like a creative muse type of thing.
Yes, yes, that's my theory here.
God, I love asteroids. They're
I
so
know,
cool.
I know.
They just get super specific. And,
Yes,
I'm a Virgo rising, so it's all about the details for me.
right,
Um, Actually, I've even read that Virgo's ruled by the asteroids, which I don't think is true, but it kind of resonated because I'm
right.
so into asteroids. But so are you, and you're not a Virgo rising.
No, but I'm a Virgo Mars,
Yeah, that's true.
so I feel
Um,
like it ignites my passion.
yeah, because they're super specific. Um,
Yes.
and you can tell a lot about how the person affects you and how you make them feel, how they feel about you. Especially since I have Pluto in the third house and I don't really take anything at face value. I
Mm.
don't typically like to, not, I wouldn't say believe what people say, but I usually can read between the lines pretty easily with Pluto in the third house. So I feel like a lot of times people don't really show you how they truly feel about you.
Oh, for
So I
sure.
turned to astrology, and I feel like people lie, but astrology doesn't
It
lie.
does not lie.
It does not lie. And there's been many times when, I start thinking about somebody obsessively, somebody that I really don't care for or have feelings for. And then I look at the astrology chart, and sure enough, they have like Pluto conjunct my ascendant or something,
Mm,
where, I'm feeling their energy or their psychic energy that they're sending me. And that's why that constant thought of them keeps coming up. So, I mean, you kind of do have to be in touch with your emotions, but astrology does help you do that when you study astrology. But I
yes.
like it because it helps you analyze the ins and outs of the relationship. There's also actually another asteroid called Lie,
Mm.
Lie, which is literally about where you get lied to. So I was in a relationship with somebody who had his sun exactly conjunct that asteroid.
Oh
And sure
God.
enough, he was like a pathological liar with me. So that one was like, a more negative one, but
Yeah.
they all basically tell different parts to the story and they're also key to analyze. So you really can't overuse asteroids, I would say, in love and compatibility. They definitely tell you a lot more about the relationship and how you make each other feel.
What about North Node synastry?
Well, that's kind of a no brainer, and we probably should have mentioned that first, but
Hmm.
that's also key to analyze. The only thing with the North Node is sometimes, depending on how evolved you are or how much you're truly embodying your North Node, you can kind of run away from the person.
Yes.
So, even for me, I mentioned that I'm not really attracted to people who have planets in my seventh house. Well, I have my North Node in my seventh house in Pisces. So, although I love Pisces placements, I typically develop great friendships with them. There's not really like an attraction to them. And I honestly think it comes from like this fear, which is very typical with the North Node,
Mm.
because you're not familiar with that. However, you do want the person's planets to be on your North Node, especially not on your South Node.
Yeah.
So I look for, somebody's sun, moon, Venus, even asteroids conjuncting the other person's North Node as an indication of a longer term relationship. Whereas with the South Node, it's not going to last because of the nature of the South Node. Both people end up getting drained, and the planet person holds the South Node person back. So
What if
usually
you have
over
synastry on
time.
both ends?
What was that?
What if you have synastry on both ends?
Yeah, so many people do. And the reason for that is sometimes they've met before in a past life, if you believe in that, or, sometimes you are meant to, like, for example, with my ex husband, he had his Saturn on my South Node.
Mm.
So with Saturn there, it basically kind of Saturn restricts everything that it touches.
Yeah.
So that was actually a good thing to have on your South Node from somebody else because it forces you out of those behaviors and into embodying your North Node, which is what you want. So sometimes there are exceptions. However, I typically want to see something on somebody else's North Node and double
Right.
whammy as well. Even if it's an asteroid like Lilith, or the BML Black Moon Lilith, which
Right.
is like calculation, that works too, or even the vertex. But I need to see something with sitting with the North Node of both people because that tells me that that person is helping you get on your life path. So the relationship will be more supported by the universe.
I can see like having both synastry on both ends would mean like you feel comfortable and at home with them, but they also force you to grow, which would be good.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's also the South Node. There is a sense of comfort and familiarity. So that makes it very kind of difficult to resist when
Right.
people have planets on your South Node. However, due to the nature of the North Node and it being kind of the reason that you would choose to come to this Earth, um, usually the universe will kind of create challenges for the relationship if you have too many South Node placements or
Mm-hmm.
too many South Node conjunctions with the other person. So you definitely don't want to be in a relationship where the universe doesn't support the relationship
Right.
because of the nature of the world in today's world. Nothing supports relationships in general. So
Mm-hmm.
it has to kind of be easy in a way. And if you're looking for that type of relationship, you have to look at the North Node. Because with the
Yes.
North Node, you can usually persevere with the person through many difficult life challenges. And I know this for a fact because I have it with my current husband.
Mm-hmm.
He has conjunctions to my North Node, and I feel like our relationship got so tested in so many different ways. And whereas other relationships would have completely disintegrated and fallen apart, that only made us closer. And I truly
Yeah.
believe that's the reason why. It's because of the North Node.
Right. Well, it's a little over 30 minutes, so that seems like a good place to end.
Wrap it up. Yeah. So,
Go on.
what to talk about next? I think we should do asteroids.
Asteroids or maybe the North Node.
All right. Well, stay tuned for our
Well,
next
stay tuned. Yeah.
episode.
But also, I wanted to ask so look at your Eros, Jas, Juno, Venus, Mars, and see what house and placement they're in, and tell us which sign you're most attracted to if you find yourself continually attracted to the same sign. Because we want to know, we want to see if our theory is correct about Jas.
Yeah, let us know. And I'm also going to be posting a video on TikTok about this too in the future.
Good.
But look at those placements first and let us know if you're really attracted to one of those signs.
Yes.
All
All
right,
right. We'll see you guys later.
bye.
Bye.